Loser, idiot, moron. Are those the words that you keep hearing inside your mind? This is something that happens often if you have a really low self-esteem. And it's time to change that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, low self-esteem can come in different settings, different areas of your life, right? Like socially, work, within yourself, right? Like what are you saying to yourself on a daily basis that may or may not be bringing you down?
Absolutely. And it comes from many different places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often those types of words like loser don't come from somewhere within you, but it's because you heard it growing up.
Right.
And you end up absorbing that and believing that. And then you realize that it's really creating difficulties for you to be functional outside in the real world, at work, anywhere else, because you're always putting yourself down, either because you've heard that being said to you or because maybe something happened where you don't trust yourself anymore, right?
Exactly. And I think that's key, like as far as the first step to recognizing is that awareness. You know, where does that come from? Where am I getting this negative self-talk from? You know, are there things that happened to me in the past that, you know, now I have adopted into my sort of vocabulary against myself?
Exactly. And you're so quick to jump at attacking yourself, right? It happens instantaneously. You drop something and you go, oh, you're so stupid, right? So it's like, whoa. Like it's really intense and it happens instantaneously. It's not like you're saying, I mean, you could be saying it out loud, but it happens within your mind. So it's like, why can't you give yourself the space to be human?
Exactly. So how do we grow that self-esteem on a daily basis? I think a lot of us struggle with that. And, you know, we have to be able to, number one, identify it, but also move on from it to a certain degree, right?
Well, first and foremost, you have to learn how to be compassionate. And it's easy to say like, oh, just be kind to yourself. But truly learn how to not aggressively interact with yourself, right? How to not think of yourself in all these negative, like, let's call it negative self-talk, right? Where you're just always beating yourself up. Is it possible for you to speak to yourself in a nice fashion? How do you speak to other people?
That's a good question.
Do you speak like that to other people? If they make the smallest little mistake, do you go, wow, what a moron?
Or you're so clumsy. What's wrong with you? Right? Like
usually not. I mean, at least I would have hoped
cases,
not.
I'm sure, right? But typically,
I mean, don't do that. If you're doing that, stop doing that.
Exactly. I mean, maybe that's the other question. Like, are you talking to other people like that? Maybe that's something like we talked about earlier. It's not just towards you that you learn to talk, you know, like this, but also towards other people. But it's not a healthy behavior.
Right. Towards yourself or to
others. Exactly.
But the point that I was trying to make, which yes, of course, there's caveats to everything. But the point I was trying to make is you do not speak that way to other people and you should not be speaking that way to yourself either.
Exactly.
Right. Is it helping you? No, it's actually creating barriers and challenges for you to actually be your true self, to be happy, right? You're really limiting the amount of time that you experience joy because you spend so much time being negative, and that's going to put you in a place of depression and anxiety, which is literally the opposite of happiness and joy and I mean, dare I say ecstasy, you know?
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is practicing being nicer to yourself in your own mind.
That would be something that I think is probably the top of the list in terms of building self-esteem.
Yeah. I think the other part is setting small realistic goals on on how to practice sort of rebuilding that self-confidence, that self-esteem, right? Because up until this point, you've probably struggled with like even recognizing, oh, I did that well, or, you know, like, oh, that was a good day, you know, or I made it to work on time, whatever, right? Like just sort of identifying the smaller wins in your life will help you build that sort of self-esteem for maybe the bigger things coming up in your life.
So celebrating the small things, essentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pointing them out, you know, sort of counting your blessings, whatever you want to call it, right? Identifying that there are some good things that you are doing and maybe paying attention a little bit to that. And maybe it doesn't come naturally to you, but sitting down and like literally putting a question on a piece of paper. What do I do well? Right? Because a lot of the time we can't really, like, if you ask that question to somebody, you're putting them on the spot and they're like, oh man, I just don't know, right? But maybe just that direct reflection of setting that time and just saying, what do I do well? Starting there, starting small.
That's great. And to sort of piggyback off of that, whenever I work with clients who truly suffer from a low self-esteem, I always start with a basic questionnaire. What are your strengths?
Exactly.
And it's crazy to realize that most people can't come up with strengths.
Exactly.
And not even strengths. It really goes so much deeper than that. It's like, what are some of your favorite things? What is your favorite movie? What is your favorite activity? What is your favorite memory? What is your biggest accomplishment? You'll realize that there's so much time that is, or so little time that is spent thinking about those things for somebody who suffers from a low self-esteem, that
Absolutely.
they cannot answer those questions because their thoughts do not revolve around victories, happiness, accomplishments, things that they enjoy. It's always this negative mindset that is, what did I do wrong? What did I fail? What am I scared of? What should I avoid?
Exactly.
So to sort of bring that into alignment, which is, if you're going to work on your self-esteem, you need to start answering those questions
Absolutely.
and refocusing your perspective from all the negative things that you constantly have happening in your mind to positive things that you have to identify about yourselves that are strengths, things that you enjoy, things that make you happy, things that you've accomplished.
Right, exactly. That is such a great point because, a lot of people can't even answer those basic questions about themselves because they don't give themselves the opportunity or the time to focus on that at all. That's not even on the forefront of their minds.
Right, exactly, 100%. And it's unfortunate, but those are the little steps, right? It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to just wake up and be like, I feel amazing about myself. I'm so great. Yeah. That's not going to happen. You really have to put in the effort, and then it happens subconsciously because you're doing the work. Anything you do that you want is going to require work. I'm going to say this over and over again. You can't go to the gym one day and be like, fuck, I have a six pack.
Exactly.
No, dude. Multiple days, commitment, accountability. You know, that's the same thing with your mind, with your spirit, with your emotions. It's going to require consistency.
Yeah. Anytime you want to make any kind of change, not just self-esteem or self-confidence related, just really any kind of change will require that consistency.
100%.
Right. So you need to make a commitment. Are you ready to make a commitment to yourself?
Me?
Well, yes, but also you guys.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Are you guys ready to make a commitment to yourself and to treat yourself nicer and to just be your biggest advocate almost, right? Like you have to point out the good too.
Right. And along the lines of being your advocate, I think about this all the time. And it's like, and not everybody has a best friend. And I think it's challenging to think about that. But how would you treat your best friend? Would you give them compassion and love and understanding? That's how you have to treat yourself in those moments too, where it's okay. And if you do come from a background of trauma where those type of words are because you heard them growing up, because a parent or a sibling constantly called you stupid or annoying or whatever, to where now you have this hypervigilance towards your own behavior around others so you don't annoy them or so they don't think you're a loser. You have to really then spend a lot of time on that trauma work to realize, wow, those aren't things that I feel. Those are things that were given to me.
Right.
And I don't have to continue to say them to myself, right? You really have to process what that did to you, how you felt, what that took from you. And that requires a little bit of work.
Absolutely. And are you perpetuating that cycle in a way, right? Like, are you taking those negative things and continuing them within yourself?
Right, exactly. And I think when you can find the root of where that voice is coming from, it's a lot easier to be able to then kind of like label it. You know, when it comes up, you're like, that's not me. That's my past. That's my trauma. That's something that I no longer desire as a part of my life. And then you actively pursue in deleting it, recoding the way that your mind works. It's not easy, but it's important.
Yeah. And I think maybe lastly, I want to point out that it also depends on who you're around.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Like if you're surrounded by people that consistently bring you down or are negative all the time towards themselves even, right? Maybe not even towards you, but maybe towards themselves. And that is what you're consistently around. You're probably going to adopt that to a certain degree. Or, you know, maybe if you don't have a chance to get away from that, you at least have the awareness. Like, I don't have to be that way too.
100%. I mean, I think, I don't want to say judgy people are probably ones to avoid or distance yourself from, but it's true, because if you can see that someone else is extraordinarily judgy, you know, and this comes up a lot in terms of weight, where it's like, oh my God, I'm so fat. I'm so fat. Then you start thinking like, whoa, if you think you're fat, and I may or may not be bigger than you, I'm going to go, do you think I'm fat? Should I be thinking I'm fat? And then boom, now you have this like spread of this type
Blown
of
out of
negative.
proportion,
Right. Because if you think that way about yourself, how do you think about me? And oh my God, should I be thinking the same as you? Like, so at this point, you're absolutely right. If you're with people who are judgmental, who are negative, who are constantly nitpicking at things, you too will inevitably gravitate towards that type of thinking.
Exactly. So just be aware of that too. Right?
Even if they're not saying it at you, they're saying it about themselves, but you're watching that behavior, and then not even consciously you're doing the same things.
Exactly. So again, back to that awareness. You need to be able to be aware of what's going on in your mind, what's going on around you, you know, and just pinpointing like, am I typically just negative about everything, negative about myself? Am I absorbing that like a sponge, right? And then sort of regurgitating it about myself. So,
and realizing you can change. If you currently are having experiences where you feel like you have a low self-esteem or a lack of confidence, you can change that. It just requires you to take action to want to do that. It's not an identity like, oh, I have low self-esteem. You don't have to create that as a label for yourself.
Right.
You can acknowledge it. You can realize that you don't want that anymore, and then actively pursue change.